Chapter 24. The sun was already shining the next morning when Okey awoke to the aroma of freshly baked bread. She dressed quickly. She should have been up earlier. She should be helping Mrs. Veerkamp make breakfast for her family. She was not in the habit of sleeping late. "Good morning, Okey," said Mrs. Veerkamp, smiling, as Okey hurried into the kitchen. She was rolling out pie dough, and the bread that smelled so good was still baking in the oven. "Good morning, Mrs. Veerkamp-san." Okey always pronounced each syllable carefully, trying to make the words sound right. English words were difficult. She looked around to see what she could do to help. The baby, Louis, was asleep in the cradle. She saw apples on the counter, so she peeled and sliced them and had them ready for the pie shells before the rest of the family came into the kitchen. They were a noisy bunch. There was much talking and laughing among Henry, Frank, William, Egbert, Bartold, and their father. This morning, they were having eggs, fried potatoes, bacon, and freshly baked bread. Everything heaped onto large platters and passed around the table. The entire family sat at the large table, Matsu also. The kitchen was quiet only when they all trooped out in their heavy boots to do their chores. Okey cleared the table and washed the dishes. So many plates, glasses, pots, and pans. Mrs. Veerkamp removed the pies from the oven and set them out to cool. Then they sat down for a cup of tea. Today, Okey would learn what her chores would be. She knew she would help Mrs. Veerkamp inside the house and also help take care of Louis. Matsu would help out with outside chores. There was much work to do in a large family and on such a large farm. Matsu and Okey both agreed they wanted to work hard so they would not be a burden to the Veerkamps. In her own mind, Okey honored her parents by working diligently. Later that week, a gentleman arrived on horseback and had a lengthy talk with Mr. Veerkamp. After the man left, Mr. Veerkamp came slowly up the stairs onto the porch and sat down in a chair opposite his wife. "How strange," he uttered, as he looked out toward the Wakamatsu farm, where some of the Japanese gardeners were still working in the fields. Henry and Matsu, standing nearby, waited silently. Mrs. Veerkamp and Okey stopped snapping green beans. "It appears," said Mr. Veerkamp, "that Herr Schnell has no intention of returning to Gold Hill. He did not make payments on the farm, and it has reverted back to the county." He pulled his eyes away from the fields and looked at his wife. "Louisa, I have agreed to purchase it." Matsu turned to Okey and repeated Mr. Veerkamp's solemn announcement. Okey stared at Mr. Veerkamp, her heart churning, mind spinning. She looked at Matsu, not believing what she had just heard. He nodded his head, yes. Her hands shook violently as she started snapping beans again. The only sound that could be heard was her frantic snap, snap, snapping. Mrs. Veerkamp reached over and gently held Okey's hands until she stopped shaking and was able to breathe normally again. "Well," said Mrs. Veerkamp, her eyes sparkling kindly as she looked at Okey, "we have just become one very large family."